All right, here we are. Look, I've gotten some plants. Here's a citronella. That's a mosquito plant. Over here we've got an aloe vera. So I'm really getting into the hang of the streaming thing here. What I want to talk about at the present moment is actually pretty simple. We just want to go through the basics of underground philosophy and what that means, and why I guess philosophy is going to work as a stream. I want to put this out there. I know probably nobody will really watch it, um, but that doesn't really matter to me. This is about it's almost like sort of a journal type of exercise, I think, to some extent. Even if there is a subject that's being investigated at the same time as the journal is being conducted, which is funny when you think about it. But really, the point of serious philosophy is sort of to produce this written conversation that happens via print media, because you can get a lot of depth out of actually writing a full-length article and producing content at that level that you don't necessarily get just by engaging with Facebook posts or doing whatever other social activities you might happen to be up to these days. So that's one of my projects. I didn't introduce it quite right. It's Serious Philosophy. It is a Medium publication that is open to contributions from anyone who is philosophically inclined. So if you're a writer, if you're a philosopher, go ahead and go to Medium and just search for Serious Philosophy, and you can see the publication. I think I'm still probably the primary contributor, but we get people from all over the internet. I also write for a number of other publications, including like Illumination. I think I've been in the Startup once or twice. And in the Apeiron blog. It's spelled Ape Iron. So Apeiron blog is a really good philosophy publication on Medium too that I enjoy. But the thing is that with Medium, even the most even the most successful articles are not going to do just extremely well in terms of either monetization or circulation. So the thing is that as a writer, what you want to do more than anything is communicate something to your reader. You it's a lot like Joe Strummer said. The point is to communicate something. And if that's not happening, then you've got a problem. Or if your circulation is limited, then that's a problem. So how do you address this issue with the practice of publishing and of trying to publicize ideas in the modern marketplace now that it's 2020 and everybody's stuck at home? Well, one of the things that I think is important to recognize is the fact that the video space is nowhere near as robust as it was in the past in terms of the rate of new content production. And so what we can take from that is that there's an opportunity there in the market to come after. Even if in the past you thought of yourself as exclusively a writer, the point really to your writing wasn't ever just to write. It was always about producing sort of an idea and then communicating that idea with an audience. And I think that you can do the same thing with video. I want to still do a little bit of work on that concept, and I'm probably going to have to work on some skills that you need to be effective in this medium and in the medium of podcasts as well, which I'm also thinking is probably a good market to look at for ideas and for content, like the content that I produce. So in this little brief live stream, what we want to do is explain the point of the future live streams, and in the hopes that if you are watching this at some point on YouTube, what you can do is you can come to Twitch and you can follow me or subscribe, I guess, to T. Dylan Daniel, and basically you'll be able to follow the Underground Philosophy series that I'm doing in real time if you want to, which is amazing. I mean, I can produce and record these videos with my laptop in next to no time. It's fascinating how quickly you can do this and how low the overhead is in terms of hard work that has to actually go in. And I think that the thing is, too, that some of these skills that I want to try to teach people by doing this are skills that you had to pay a lot of money to learn in the past. To really read a text and get the most out of it is a very, it's a labor intensive proposition. You aren't going to just sit down and read a book once and get the entire value out of it. You're not going to understand the historical context of it. You're not going to understand what it was written for most of the time. And you're not going to understand what it's about, which is, I think, an important distinction to make and an important break against certain movements in the philosophical and perhaps also the theological realms that really insist that the text has to stand on its own. I don't think that's ever been a thing or ever will be. Texts are not able to stand on their own. But with something like a video, the amount of content can be, on the one hand, it's looser. So in producing these videos, I still very much intend to rely upon the text itself, even to the point where I believe I intend to spend a significant amount of time just reading the text to the audience. That serves two functions. One, if you've read the book and you're trying to get a little bit deeper with it, that's going to help to peg what I'm talking to specific places in the text where you can then turn and follow along, if you will, to sort of get the full thrust of what the author is saying there. But also, if you are listening on a podcast and perhaps you're working on, whatever it is that you're working on, you might be doing carpentry or driving down the freeway. It doesn't matter. You don't have to have a book out to follow along with the ideas that we're going to be going over. And I think that's a good thing. That frees people up to spend more time. And actually, I've got a pretty funny story about this from back in grad school. A group of us got together during the summer and decided to go through some of the core philosophy texts that we hadn't really been exposed to. I could go into the Texas state drama a little bit and talk about my experience there, but I think I'd rather not. We can just kind of leave that by saying I went to grad school at Texas State University. I earned a Master of Arts in Applied Philosophy of Ethics and a certificate in Professional Ethics. And from there, I moved into teaching for a short period. Wasn't really able to make very much money, so I had to figure something else out. Started doing Uber to make money and got sucked into the wonderful, crazy world of technology. And that's been fascinating and a lot of fun, really. So no complaints on that front, really. There was definitely some drama surrounding the Texas State thing, and it just doesn't really matter anymore at this point. But one of the things that we did while I was at Texas State was we organized various different groups to get closer to some of these philosophers that we didn't feel like we were getting enough exposure to because we weren't reading them in the classes that we were taking. And one of these philosophers was Thomas Hobbes. The book that he wrote was called Leviathan. It was really an incredible read. The first time I did it, back all the way in probably 2003 or 2004 when I was an undergrad, maybe 2005. But I had definitely read it years and years before. And then what we did in grad school was we were actually on our way to a conference. It was me and probably three other in Master of Arts in Applied Philosophy and Ethics students. And we listened to it in the car on the way to this conference. And it was recorded by this British man. And it was just hysterical because the accent worked so unbelievably well with the text that it was just, I don't know, it was really quite a bit of fun. And so the thing is that what essentially we did was we all had either read or encountered the text in the past. That's how we knew we wanted to do it. but then we listened to it and we also read it, and we discussed it continuously for probably 3 days. We made jokes about some of the stranger points, the discussion of witches, which I mean is just ridiculous. But at the same time, there was a concept in that became central to uh, my project, Formal Dialectics, which is probably the most significant thing I've done to date. It's a book that was peer reviewed by Cambridge Scholars Publishing, and I'm extremely proud of the work that went into it. I basically did that instead of going to a PhD program. And I do feel, just as good as any other professional philosopher today, albeit with a slightly different focus. One of the things that I have a little bit of trouble with is actually that I can read pretty much anything. So I can pick up these journals in physiology or these journals in psychopharmacology, and I can study these things, but I don't have any of the credentials that I need to really be taken seriously in those fields. So I'm sort of cordoned off to just proper or pure philosophy, which I do have the degrees for, but which it's very difficult to really break into seriously, or that's kind of a loaded term, since what we're looking at here for the next couple of days is de Beauvoir, who speaks quite a bit about seriousness and why that's a problem. So maybe that's not the right word, but professionally might be the thing. And my intention here is sort of multifaceted. I'm breaking into writing quite a bit. There are a couple of blogs that are really going out of their way to feature some of the things that I write, mainly about cryptocurrency, which I guess is a thing that you're allowed to do as a philosopher. And so I'm moving into that, but I'm also sort of noticing, hey, there are several hundred people that look at these articles that I put on Medium, and some of them do very well. And the two things that do the best are, philosophy on the one hand, and then cryptocurrency on the other hand. And so what I want to do is I want to start with philosophy, but then maybe start making videos and or podcasts that center on cryptocurrency as well. And that's a really interesting space. I mean, philosophically, politically, economically, things are changing, and they're changing because of the introduction of cryptocurrency. And yet there's still this ongoing philosophical project of trying to understand where we are, how far we've come, where we were before. So you're putting together these trends and trying to develop these really, in one sense, basic, but basic isn't really the right word, because basic implies simplistic or easy, right? We want a foundational, I guess, account of who we are as a community, who we are as individuals, and how those two different things sort of interplay with one another. And I think ethics still has yet to really produce this. I've tried to go into it to some extent with a project that was very similar to Formal Dialectics. The idea was it was going to be an ethics that tied all the way down to the neuroscientific level. So you had like this complete sort of reductive framework that could be used to explain human behavior to some extent, using the tools of both philosophy and of cognitive science. And of course, things like artificial intelligence factor in as well. So there's quite a bit that all links up and jives with this book where we're starting, this Simone de Beauvoir, Ethics of Ambiguity. And I think that makes a lot of sense. It's probably the most significant book that I've found in some time. I mean, it really does. It's weird. Bernard Williams was a famous British philosopher who passed away, I believe, a little over a decade ago. And around the year 2000, he released a book that was called Ethics and the Limits of Philosophy. And so Williams, in some sense, is this contemporary, he was a guru, you could say, of ethics. And he knew pretty much everything as far as the Kantian, Aristotelian framework that sort of grew up and evolved all these different ways as humanity's conception of reason, of science, and of the mental side of life materialized. And really, what's happened is that in about the past 100 years or so, there's been a sea change in terms of what we think minds are capable of and what we think minds are made out of. And so, what's happened is that we have, to some extent, just completely overturned these long-standing assumptions about the nature of what goes on in our minds, and that's phenomenal. That's fascinating, but it's also very difficult to sort of keep up with because the iterations are getting faster and faster, and unless you understand sort of some of the base states or some of the initial discoveries that led to these things, you're never really going to get a grasp of what it means to be human in the way that we conceive of the term now, or in the way that we can conceive of the term if we do what we're supposed to do and we do it very well. I love coffee, by the way. I drink coffee probably more than I should. That probably explains my late nights. But who cares? I like it. It wakes me up and keeps me focused. Highly recommend. Anyway, so with underground philosophy, the goal is going to be to sort of take the university model of how philosophy works, and we want to work inside of that model by doing things that are of such quality that they could be peer reviewed. We want to push the limits in terms of what's actually taking place in society today, and our ability to accurately explain, predict, and understand these phenomena, right? So the goal in studying ethics is not to, this is an old Aristotle bit. The goal of ethics, why we study it, is not to learn what is good, right? Ethics is the study of what is good. We study what is good, not to learn what is good. It's kind of a weird jujitsu thing. The point of studying what is good, according to Aristotle at least, is to become better yourself. So you develop as a person by understanding what the good is, and that makes you better. That's powerful. There's something very important about that. And I think that to some extent the normative ethics that you see in the university system so much today kind of just completely misses that. I don't want to go too far with that because I think The Good Place, that TV show, is a relatively accurate portrayal of what university philosophy conceives of moral philosophy as being, and what university philosophy today conceives of moral philosophy as being for. That said, there are some things they get right, and there are some things that probably not so much. Anyone who's watched the show knows that what they do is they focus on these old school philosophers by not necessarily reading what they wrote so much, but by sort of coming up with these abstractions that allow them to more or less understand parts of the philosophy that these people did, and then compare and contrast these against each other. So, for example, deontology versus utilitarianism, which is a better decision which is a better solution to help us make decisions about matters that are moral. And the question there is, I would say, a false dichotomy, right? We don't necessarily have to choose utilitarianism or deontology, much less what those concepts represent in the modern ethical moral framework, right? I think it's very possible, and perhaps the best word to use is that it's extremely likely that the university philosophy systems that we have today are getting some of these things wrong, right? So they're saying deontology is, sort of an ontological argument for an answer to the question, why be moral? And really, if you look closely at the father of deontology, as they say, Immanuel Kant, what you find is that there's this sort of update that's taken place, right, to the old school Aristotelian framework. and there's a new assumption, and what that assumption is that reason itself is the highest good, and actions are good insofar as they develop reason, and they're bad insofar as they hinder our understanding of what is called for. There's always an answer in some sense. And I think that those are questionable assumptions. I think Simone de Beauvoir does a great job of questioning those assumptions. And yet, if you sort of stuck to the main line, so to speak, in terms of the research and the understandings that people currently have of these phenomena and of these philosophers, you would never understand what was going on there. The framework isn't being built correctly. And why is that? Well, I think the university system is in the midst of a crisis. I think that's extremely apparent. The cost of tuition alone, the student loan debacle, there's just so many problems with it. And these are problems that apply to the liberal arts, they're problems that apply to the hard sciences, and everything in between. Even things like management programs are having a tough time because there's this impetus that's put on raising money that just doesn't jive. It doesn't stack well with the goals of an economic institution, or excuse me, of an educational institution, right? The economy is sort of one thing, and then actually learning things because they matter to you is something that's somewhat separate. And in fact, what I've seen in my career as a professional philosopher, which I would say I have been since I graduated with my master's in philosophy, although I've applied it a handful of different ways. I've done everything from tech companies to biotech companies, and I've done professional research. I've written articles. I've done a lot of really strange and seemingly unrelated things as a philosopher. But the thing is that you're prepared to do all these things by philosophy because you learn sort of these methods of questioning that are extremely valuable. And I did learn those from the university system, but when I tried to develop them in the university system, I was met with sort of scorn. It was really strange because I was celebrated, at the 2014 Southern California Philosophy of Language Conference. A lot of people really enjoyed my presentation. I made a lot of friends that year. But in Texas, it was one of those things where there were a couple of professors that really enjoyed my work and really thought that I was creating something useful. And then the rest of the department pretty much just pushed back against it. They weren't fans of it. And they didn't appreciate me trying to do it in the first place. They wanted to sort of oppose my methodology, and that's strange to me because, in general, when somebody comes to me and asks for help from the standpoint of wanting to be a student or being a student, it's very difficult for me to turn those people down. I've got a handful of random connections from around the internet, and we have a good time together. We it's really incredible to be able to sit down and talk to somebody about something that seems to be the most important thing in the world to you. And that's very gratifying. And so as I sit here and I think about the purpose of this underground, philosophy channel that I'm starting right now, the idea is twofold. There's sort of two prongs. The first prong is that we want to reify the university taught philosophy curriculum, but we also want to delve deeper into the philosophers that are discussed there, and we want to develop a more thorough grasp than most people are really willing to provide on that front for us today. And if somehow we can figure out a way to make both of those goals happen, probably in partnership with serious philosophy, and almost certainly at some point in partnership with Crypto Writer and perhaps even the Libraland Press. I think there are going to be a lot of different opportunities for me in the cryptocurrency space, and I intend to attempt to maximize on those. So each sort of underground philosophy I don't necessarily want to say effort or series, but each video is going to have a definite subject. Each video is going to have a before and an after video, so you can go back and these things will all tie fairly nicely into one another. So that people later can come and just listen through the whole way and get more or less a sense of what's going on here, whether or not they even read any books. And there are going to be two distinct. I want to say distinct. I guess they're not really distinct though. We're going to talk about cryptocurrency on the one hand. We're going to talk about sort of the ramifications of cryptocurrency that are likely in the future. And the reason that's important is because philosophically, where we're at right now is somewhat behind the curve. So in an effort to update the discipline of philosophy and to sort of resort these thinkers in terms of relevance and in terms of what's important so that they are more in dialogue and in connection with our current environment, both technologically and naturally speaking, because both are changing substantially through the COVID-19 pandemic, the fires, the climate change, um, and the economic crash that's ongoing. But, I mean, it is very important to have a grasp of all of these things. It's also very important to understand these useful models that philosophers have spent so much time constructing. And so our goal isn't necessarily one or the other. Our goal is to make ourselves better people that are more able to live in the world that we find ourselves and to feel free in that world and to feel comfortable in that world despite the changes that are taking place. That's the goal. The goal isn't just to look at philosophy or just to look at cryptocurrency or any of the other topics that we're going to end up exploring here. And so I want to open this up to any viewer comments, any ideas that you might have. If you want to be a writer, go ahead and scope us out on Medium. Serious Philosophy is the name of the publication. You can go in there and there's a document where you can read about how to become a writer and just follow those steps. And I'll add you as a writer, at least for now, and see what you write. And if it's good, I'll throw it up, and you can be part of the discussion. Yeah, yeah. In fact, we haven't really rejected very many pieces at all at this point, and I think everybody that's been involved with it has brought value. And at the end of the day, that's the goal, right? That's what we do so that we can be where we want to be in life. We bring value, we find ways to create value, and we produce that value. And so the hope here is that what we'll be able to do as a group is to produce something like a philosophical account of the world and of how the world used to be and of what the changes are and where the trends point to down the line. And by doing that, the hope is that whatever we're up to individually, whether it's writing or recording videos or maybe there's a 9 to 5 in there somewhere. Maybe you're working on figuring out what to do next because you were relying on rideshare and it's just not safe to do that anymore. I mean, I definitely know what that feels like at least. And so I think it'll be exciting and I think it'll be fun. And honestly, I can't wait to get started. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this stream up here, having more or less enumerated the purpose of underground philosophy and set more or less the right expectations for you as far as what kinds of content you'll find here, what the energy level is that you'll find here. And basically the goal is just going to be to come back in an hour or two after I've kind of finalized my ideas for the lecture about de Beauvoir's first section of Ethics of Ambiguity. I'm going to take you through a deep textual reading of that book, and we're going to try to be exegetical instead of eisegetical. We don't want to read our views into the text. We want to read de Beauvoir's views out of the text. So we're going to push really hard, and hopefully I honestly don't know what to expect in terms of the length of that video. Hopefully, it won't be too terribly long because I don't know if my computer can handle it. If it is, and Google. I mean, what is the deal with Google these days? They're doing all kinds of really bizarre things that are keeping me locked out of these accounts I've had for years because I used like a VPN to log in once or something. So anyway, there's some strange technical things that need to be sorted out shortly, and I'm gonna do that too. But let's shoot for, say, I don't know. My dad just texted. He wants to go for a drive. He's got like a little car now. It's actually pretty cool. I like spending time with the guy quite a bit. So I think I'm gonna go for a drive with him, and then probably here around I don't know 8, 9 o'clock. I'll come back and we'll do the deep de Beauvoir reading, and kind of go for that. Oh, by the way, I'm in Lubbock, Texas, which is in the Central Time Zone. So when I say 8 or 9 o'clock, I guess what we're talking about is GMT -6, so about 3 in the morning for my British friends out there. I'll try to stream some in the morning, but you know the YouTube videos will always be there too. So watch anytime you like. Thank you so much for tuning in. I think this is going to be really incredible. I can't wait for us to go on this journey together. Feel free to drop me a line. My website is thomasdyllandanielauthor.com. You can find me under the handle at epicdylan on Twitter. Actually, that's not Twitter. Twitter is Thomas Dylan Danny, or Thomas Dylan Dan 3, and then Medium is Epic Dylan. Sint is Epic Dylan. I try to do everything as Epic Dylan these days, but it doesn't always work out. So, okay, that's enough about that. I'll be dropping essays too. So check in the comments for links. And there'll be at least one link to something. I'll probably come up with a signature and have them be the same for all the different posts at some point. But I haven't quite gotten there yet. We're really just kind of getting up and running. And you know, honestly, there's a lot of momentum. I feel very excited about this project. So I can't wait to to continue to make some videos. And I hope you enjoy watching them as much as I enjoy making them or listening to them. Maybe on Spotify at some point. Cheers.